everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to do a review of the Book Naturalist Book Club's pick for February, which is A Bigger Picture, My Fight to Bring a New African Voice to the Climate Crisis by Vanessa Nakate. Vanessa Nakate is a young woman from Uganda in Africa, and she got interested in the climate crisis after it was right at the end point. She was finishing up her college degree in business administration, and it was in 2018, and there was a lot of flooding, really catastrophic flooding in Uganda at that time. And she got really interested in the news reports about this flooding, the impacts that it was having on her country, and looking into the causes of it, and realized that she'd only had one class in her entire schooling through 4 years of college that had addressed climate change. And why was that? So she just started to do research on that, came across a lot of really good information on the science behind climate change online, and then started to see a lot of young people who were participating in activism, particularly Greta Thunberg. So that really inspired her to do activism in her own backyard in Uganda. And this book details her experiences as a young woman in that country, speaking out for her country to do something in an active, proactive way to address the climate crisis. I found this book to be really, really inspiring and very interesting, well written, but it's a very straightforward type of nonfiction. This is not, like literary, lyrical writing about nature. This is a call to action. This is one young woman's story about her experiences of trying to stand up for what she believes is right and what that looks like in her place in the world. So I was very impressed with the way that Nakate speaks about activism, how she has overcome obstacles placed in her way to participating in activism in her own country. Uganda is not like the United States. It's very much much a stricter country, particularly for young girls and women, in terms of the activities that that is acceptable for them to participate in. Holding a sign, protesting against lack of action on climate change in front of Parliament in her country is an offense that can get you arrested just standing there with a sign, not doing anything else. And particularly if you're a young woman, then there's a lot of criticism that you're doing something that's sort of out of bounds, seen as disreputable, not what young women should be doing. Many people say she should be focused on either completing her education or getting married and having children. She shouldn't be running around town and speaking her mind about a topic that she feels strongly about. So I think, she really does a great job of being a voice for her generation in her particular country. You may also have heard of Vanessa Nakate because of an incident that occurred when she had been first working on climate activism. She got invited to attend a UN conference in Davos, Switzerland, and with other young climate activists, Greta Thunberg and other young activists. And the young folks had met and were discussing climate change and how to best promote taking action to their governments and to the world. And there was an AP reporter there, Associated Press reporter there, taking photos, and the group of young people from all around the world got together, and this group of 5 or 6 young people, they took a picture and it was published. AP published it. And so it appeared in social media and newspapers around the world, and they cropped Nakate out of that picture. She was the only Black person in the picture, and they cropped her out. And Vanessa spoke out about that on social media, about her hurt that had happened, and about what message that sends to the wider world when you crop the one Black young woman out of the photo. And it raised a lot of awareness about how people are treated differently when they speak out on issues, whether they're from the global north, who are privileged in their speaking out, or the global south, who are disregarded and disenfranchised and sort of shoved out of the way. And I think because of her courage in addressing this issue and pointing it out, and she wasn't hostile about it to the AP. She just was like, what the heck, why would you do that? And they had a lame excuse about why they did it, but everybody knows why they did it. And Vanessa knows why they did it too. And I just think her courage in addressing that issue was really exemplary. She dealt with it with a lot of grace and courage. And it's just very inspiring. And I think that her ability to point out how people are treated differently on this issue, whether it's activism for climate change or anything, like the voices from the global south are not positioned to receive attention, whereas voices from the global north are positioned to receive that attention. Those Western and European voices and American voices are privileged by the media, and it's ridiculous. All of these young people are working hard to bring attention to a very important issue, an issue that affects all of us, is going to be the central issue, I think, that's facing us today in this world, and we need to hear from all of these young folks. So I really was impressed with her work in that area to draw attention to that particular issue. I also love the way in this book that she points out intersections between social justice issues, whether it be domestic violence, how women and girls are treated differently than boys and men, climate change, economy, like all these different issues. She points out, like, you can't separate these issues out from the climate crisis, that education and how education is withheld from women and girls is a huge issue that directly relates to how we can deal with the climate crisis. People who don't have enough to eat and who don't have jobs to go to have less ability to deal with climate issues than people who have jobs and food. So I really appreciated the fact that she was not separating out issues. She was not trying to just speak. I mean, her focus is on climate activism, but she very much discusses these other issues as well, and how they intersect with the climate crisis and how important it is to deal with the issues together. One thing that she's been involved in is she's through the creation of a nonprofit organization. She's been able to get some funding to do some work within Uganda to add solar panels to schools, and also cook stoves that work through those solar panels, so that the schools don't have to A, burn wood to cook food, and B, have power all the time, so people, the kids can study. And my eyes were opened. I mean, I know, obviously, that educational opportunities are different in different countries, and that I am very privileged to have been born in the United States and to have educational opportunities available to me that I have had. And Uganda is a much different place. Parents have to pay to send their kids to school. There is no free public schooling for young people. And not only do you have to pay school fees, you have to send your kids with wood so that the school can prepare food for those children to eat. And the power is not on 100% of the time. So the work that she's doing is very basic, providing very basic services and infrastructure at a level that really impacts the ability of young women, young girls, young boys to get an education. Now, we aren't going to be able to make the changes we need to make in this world unless everybody has equal opportunity to education. Education is so important, and that's one thing that Nakate and I agree on, is how important education is. So I was really impressed by her ability to see clearly, like, she's aware, like, this activism of hers and this nonprofit of hers that's installing solar panels and replacing stoves is not going to stop climate change and global warming, but it is making positive impact in her community and in her country. And every piece is important. Every piece helps. And I think she makes the point that we can't be held hostage to this idea that the actions we can take aren't perfect and aren't going to solve the problem. We still have to take those actions. We have to look at the options that are available to us in our own circumstances and make the best decisions we can that will benefit the climate and benefit the world and the environment without, falling victim to this, that you have to be perfect or you have to do everything 100% so that there is no impact at all on the climate. So I think that's such an important message and such a realistic way to deal with the climate crisis. I think she's done a really great job to bring those things to the front. The other thing is, my favorite chapter in this book was the part called Speaking Out for Women and Girls. The information that she provides on how what the world is like for a lot of young girls and women was just so enlightening and so powerful and really important. You know, the fact that there's 130 million girls of school age that are not currently receiving an education in the world. That number was much higher than I knew it to be. That at her all-girls boarding school in Uganda, every 6 weeks the girls were forced to endure pregnancy checks, which involved a physical examination. I mean, I just really don't have any words to convey to you how abhorrent I think that practice is. And, you know, here in the United States, there's a lot of discussion about how reproductive rights are being taken away from American women. And I would just say, you know, there's a lot of places in this world where reproductive rights are non-existent for women, and we need to really address that issue. I think that's a huge issue. And the oppression of women and girls directly intersects with our ability to face and deal with the biggest problems facing our world today. And I really appreciated Nakate's ability to bring that to the forefront of her story. I'm just looking at my notes over here to make sure I don't miss anything. I think the other thing that she does here at the end of the book is she gives some concrete steps to becoming an activist. This book is really directed towards younger people. I felt that was my one criticism of the book, is that at times Nakate's voice seems very young for her actual age. She is, you know, she was 24, I think, when this book was published, or when she was writing this book. And her voice seems much younger than that to me, like that of a teenager. And some of that may just be her culture and the environment that she was brought up in. But I do think that this book is aimed to young people. And honestly, I feel like young people are the hope for the future. And that's the other thing about this book, is I feel it leaves you with a hopeful tone. This is not a doomsday book at all. It's dealing with a very important topic that is really serious and is really a crisis and an emergency, but she doesn't leave you with a feeling of hopelessness. Instead, you're left with a feeling of there are things we can do, and there are young people tackling this problem, working with a lot of enthusiasm and commitment, and it's really, really inspiring. So very glad that I read this book. I think this is a really excellent look into this issue, and also just bringing attention to how much we don't hear from voices in the global south, and how important it is that we listen to those voices, because these are the folks that are on the front line. These are the folks that are already experiencing the really terrible impacts of climate change, and it's through no fault of their own. It's through the fault of the rest of us in the global north, who have already impacted the climate to the point where folks in the global south, you know, can't grow crops and experience the kind of devastating flooding that she's talking about in this book. So I'm very glad to have had this perspective, and really glad that we picked this one for Book Naturalists Book Club in the month of February. So in the month of March, we will be reading To Speak for the Trees by Diana Beresford-Kroeger. My life's journey from ancient Celtic wisdom to a healing vision of the forest. I believe that this author's heritage is Irish, and so this book is picked for March, which is the Irish Readathon month. I don't know anything about this book other than it's about trees and forests, and I am all about trees and forests, so I'm very excited to check this one out and see what it's all about. I hope you will join us in reading this book in the month of March for the Book Naturalists Book Club. I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read, and I will talk to you later.